And we're back, and we were discussing before we went to break some of the narratives versus the reality in terms of how the county spends its money. There is a narrative that the county has been mismanaging its resources, and we went around the table. Kamogo, you told us in terms of shilling for shilling, the kinds of scandals that we've seen versus the kind of mismanagement that we are told about you can't even compare.
It's also that at the county level, you have natural structures that limit the level of pilferage that you can do. Don't forget that a lot of projects at the counties are very micro projects. So there's only so much money you can take. You know what I mean? You're not doing... before someone notices. The minute you start doing a project of 100 billion shillings, 200 billion shillings, taking a 5 billion, nobody will notice. In the counties, the typical project, the highest will be, there'll be an exceptional one that goes beyond 100 million shillings. Most of them are 10, 20 million shillings, and they are visible. They are markets, they are roads, so people know. So it's just a little more difficult to do the sort of pilferage that has entered into the psyche of Kenyans. You know, that we are losing money, we have devolved corruption. Yes, there is wastage, there is stealing, but it is child's play compared to what happens in a typical department. You know, so that is a reality. So it's and you can and I think people have done studies, and you can do the Auditor General's reports. If you look at the reports, even anecdotally, you'll find the county assembly spent an extra 1 million shillings. You know, those are the complaints. But if you are to compare the equivalent numbers, and I think that's what David was talking about, look at the total amount of money spent at the counties. You know, it is minuscule. It is still wrong. But it is minuscule, and that is not where our problem is, even though it's a problem.
All right. Abraham, I want to come now to solutions in a sense, right? So we've discussed what's behind, the current impasse between national and counties on division of revenue, right? From where you sit, given the narratives, given the language, given the real problems, how do we get out of the situation that we're in currently, in the short term, where we have this disagreement, whether it's 310 or 335. And long term, how do we resolve this so that we get a system of governance that truly delivers service to the people where they're supposed to deliver?
Thank you. I think one is that the situation we find ourselves in, I think as colleagues have carefully explained, is that it's not new. We've always had fights when the division of revenue bill is being discussed, always, because there are always different figures. The proposals by the Commission on Revenue Allocation are rarely, respected and followed. But what can we do in the short term? I think the fact, of course, the matter is in the Supreme Court, and my hope was that something can be done that also shuts the national government. I don't think the crisis is big enough for national government to see the reality of what it's doing. In the medium term, I think that's where finally it will end up in terms of that conversation. So that then, if also the national government cannot function, then people have to sit down and talk and be able to function.
And have a real conversation.
So
you're saying the Supreme Court is not going to resolve that?
I don't think the Supreme Court can resolve, because it's a political matter. It's not necessarily a purely administrative, technical matter of this figure against this figure. I think from the discussions we've had here, that and even if that does not happen because of the decisions, of course, Supreme Court will pronounce itself at some point. But my hope is that the Supreme Court does not go into how much of the figures, but rather speaks to the principles. Kamodo is here, he can say more about the legal. But if the Supreme Court can speak more to the principles, because most of the critical questions placed before it, even other courts, high courts, were more on the principles as opposed to the number.
That's true.
In fact, I was going to say, Abraham, that there are several questions that are being asked of the Supreme Court. None of them have to do with the actual allocation in terms of numbers. That is not the province of the Supreme Court. But I think that the issue is, we are saying this dilemma, this crisis that happens every year can be resolved if the Supreme Court determines certain issues. For example, can the national government continue to budget and appropriate money if the division of revenue bill fails? Because that division of revenue bill is the one that allocates money to both. So where this money that the national government is appropriating is from where. So that's number one. If that was answered in the affirmative, then what it would do, it would force the two levels to agree before the financial year ends. Number two, what is the role of, what is the effect of the proposals by the Commission of Revenue Allocation? This is an independent organ which has representatives from the principal political institutions and representatives of the Treasury. Should its proposals have the same weight as the Association of Miraa Sellers? Or should it have, so those, they may not be binding in the sense that because ultimately Parliament appropriates money and it's a political process, but surely it must have a more significant impact than what we have seen to date. The third question is, can the national government budget for functions that are allocated by the Constitution to counties? As a principle, if a lot of, and there are 2, 3, 4 others, if those principles were answered one way or the other, it makes it easier for us to make this discussion principle-based. As it is now, it looks like, no, give me 20 billion, no, I won't give you, I don't have. I mean, this is a serious constitutional conversation that should be informed by PFM constitutional principles. Those principles are the ones that we want the Supreme Court to give more teeth.
The pessimist would say that even when these principles are hammered out, then there's always the incentive, as has been in this country, to ignore what these principles mean. And I think that's what you're talking about.
I think one is that there's that problem, which then means are we going around and coming back to the same person, to the same place where we started? There's something that is happening in this country, and any critical observer will appreciate the fact that as all these other things are going on, there's a lot of public empowerment that is going on. People are becoming more clearer and clearer of where the problem is. And therefore, they are starting to push from their counties, from their different spaces. You know, we've seen an increment in just a number of petitions that are, citizen-driven to the county assemblies. Maybe we are not seeing so many at the national level because people are active within their counties. You know, and that pressure will soon blow up from those counties. You know, and we will start seeing more and more pressure. I think that's a power that the Constitution gave to the people. You know, that's gonna be turning things around. You know, slowly by slowly. It will become, maybe in future, it will become very difficult to just go to a public function and just dish out development projects to people. They will ask you, but where is that money coming from?
Where's the money coming from?
You know, we put that in our plans. Is it from our county or is it from the national government? If it is, how much is it that is allocated to that kind of conversation? But that's a long-term discussion.
How long-term, given the point that David raised, in terms of the amount of debt that has now been loaded onto the country and crowding out the counties from development. How long-term is this discussion? If this is already happening and we're in a situation where the debt, I don't think we should even call it a pinch, you know, like it's very painful, you know. How long do you think, and this is now sort of like crystal balling it, how long do you think these conversations will last before that pressure comes to bear?
I don't think these conversations are going anywhere. I'll tell you why. You see, let's back again. I'm going to see the big picture. There are two figures, 350 or 350. I think people have to bear in mind and remember that devolution has allowed us to be able to discuss how much money we are entitled to. Okay? So we know that counties are entitled to a figure which is, the government is saying that they're entitled to 315 or something, and they're saying that they're entitled to 350. Actually, it is not the national government's to say. That. It is a division of revenue bill to determine, process to determine. Because the money belongs to the country, we put it in a common kitty, and then we as people decide how much we should spend locally and how much should be spent by the national government. Before this constitution, this was not possible because money was allocated to ministries. So nobody lives in a ministry. So you could not have a conversation that whether water is having more. You are not politically organized in ministries. So we live in places. So one of the fundamental transformations of the new constitution is we have made geographies, the places we live, the political units which are allocated money. That is very important. Unfortunately, the public, we sometimes become like the Israelis when they were leaving Egypt. And because you have a few hiccups, you begin to say life was better in Egypt. Not recognizing that if we go back to a system where money is allocated to ministries, we are not entitled to it. It is the bureaucrats who are entitled to it because they are the ones who live in ministries, as we live in places. So one of the things we must absolutely safeguard is that money must be allocated to places. And we must demand now that my place is entitled to this amount of money. We know it. And then when it comes to my county, my sub-county, and my road, and my that kind of thing. So that is the only... But the center doesn't want that. That is what the center is fighting. And it has fought that by borrowing money.
Yes.
Because when the money was taken to the counties, they substituted that by borrowing so that they can continue eating. And now that debt is a problem. So when people ask where money has gone, they can only ask that money because they know how much it is. And it is not coming. So we are going to have a conversation as to why money is not available. Okay? And then we are going to find that people went and borrowed irresponsibly. The question is whether we are going to have political accountability for that irresponsible. So I think it's a fundamental transformation of our politics and a good one. Because this is what politics is supposed. Resource allocation is one of the most important agendas
In politics.
in politics. But in the past, we could not discuss resource allocation because we did not know how resources are allocated, and they were not located in a manner that we could engage the subject politically. The other thing is that you can see the process that we put in place, and Kamoto has emphasized this a lot in this conversation, being subverted and being played games with. If we had people at the top who are committed to devolution, these mechanics would not be an issue.
That's true. They would work.
They would. People would sit together and say, "How do we solve this problem?"
Yeah.
And
But
so
that conversation isn't happening.
it is because the people at the people at the center want to frustrate. So let us be clear. There are no people whose hands are bound, and that they cannot sit together in the interests of the people and find a workaround, even around the legal issues. It is because they want to frustrate, and they are looking for every possible ratchet that they can use to frustrate. So we are not going to solve the problem, as you are asking, because we are not collectively looking for a solution.
But won't the solution be, or rather won't the face of the problem be thrust upon us when the debt burden becomes so painful that you feel it in your house?
I think the people who are determined to frustrate are not going to give up frustrating.
Even at that point.
Even at that point, they are not going to give up. So there is a big political sort of process that is going to have to happen in this country to determine, to resolve whether we are going to implement the Constitution or whether we are not going to implement it. It will come to that. Because don't forget also, the fundamental tenet of that Constitution, as I was saying during the break, is democracy. And democracy is predicated on free and fair election. And we are in these political handshakes and all manner of things because people have refused to accept free and fair elections as a means of transfer of power.
Yeah.
So they are looking for alternative accommodations, which mean that they are not held accountable by the people, because the fundamental thing about free and fair election is, for instance, even people are unhappy with the way you have managed the economy, like you have borrowed recklessly, they should be able to throw you out using the ballot. But you have frustrated the ballot. So it is not just devolution that we are frustrating. They are also frustrating the means by which we can hold them accountable. And that is much more fundamental. Because ultimately what you're seeing is then the consequence of the impunity that they can frustrate all processes of being held politically accountable. They don't want devolution, they can frustrate it. They don't want to be subjected to democratic accountability, they can frustrate it. They don't want an independent judiciary, they can starve it of money or otherwise frustrate it. So we will have to ask ourselves in this. So that is the nature of the political challenge that we have. We passed this constitution, and we are openly seeing it being frustrated. Now, with devolution, it is being frustrated where people feel the bread and butter issues immediately. So the question is, how will the people react to that? You see, when you frustrate the judiciary, it is very abstract. But when you now move that frustration to health services at my local dispensary, that is, or the infrastructure, local infrastructure. So it's a question of, it has now reached the people.
And that was really the essence of devolving. It was actually to ensure that citizens are holding those who they elect responsible, because the national government was too far removed. You know, you couldn't connect the president's failures with the problems of your welfare. And then you are such a small unit, there's not much you could do. But now you're connecting directly your failures, the collapse of services with this person who you can do something about. Which is why I think for me the tragedy of the attempt to frustrate and to weaken devolution is that what you're doing, you're leaving citizens without options. You know, ultimately, citizens need to know there's something they can do. If you leave them helpless, then you're calling for a crisis. You know, and you don't know, and it will get to a point where you can manage that crisis. So the truth of the matter is the strengthening of devolved systems, the ensuring that people are empowered and that they're holding their leadership accountable is good even for the center in the long term. In the short term, you may think that it will resolve your problems. But what you're creating is a crisis you may not be able to manage eventually. So it really is self-defeating. It really is self-defeating to be having this conversation because if you look at issues like health, and let's not forget that the problem here is both ideological. I mean, there are people who believe ideologically that a centrist system is better. But a lot of it is about procurement. It's about controlling of government resources by a small number of people.
You speak about that, and the debate around the managed equipment services in this division of revenue speaks exactly.
Precisely, you know, because how do you explain to me why the county government of Turkana needs the national government to decide that it needs equipment for this, and that? That is precisely anti-devolution. You know, what you expected to do. Now, there may be need sometimes to pool resources, you know, and the economies of scale in bulk buying. But that decision cannot be from the top imposed downwards. It has to be people sitting down and saying, this is what I need, this is what you need, we can purchase together. That is the spirit of devolution. These things are replicated over and over and over again. You find laws that are passed where the national government is the one that approves boreholes in Wajir. You know, why do you think it's about power? It's because the person who makes those approvals has their financial benefits that accrue. So that is the reason why what appears to be just a disagreement between two houses called the National Assembly and the Senate is actually not about that. It's because it's fundamental. There are people who benefit from controlling the past at the center. And when you devolve, you weaken them, and they are strong. You know, so it is to recognize that if we are going to empower this country, if this country is going to be sustainable in the long term, we better be investing in making people empowered at the grassroots.
And the process that you're involved in right now in the Supreme Court essentially is to do that. It's a fight to empower or to strengthen devolution.
It is. It is to try and answer the question. why are we running away from constitutional principles and what David is talking about, ratchets, looking for every opportunity to say, oh, but the law does not allow us.
Yeah.
It doesn't. The problem is not with the law. The problem is a problem of our mindset and the benefits that accrue from that mindset. So what we want, the Supreme Court may not resolve everything, but can it take it slightly higher and incrementally? But the good thing, my own feeling, is that devolution, the people sometimes are much faster than their governments. You know, sometimes even when we fight about transfer of functions and all that, Kenyans have internalized that these are their functions, and Kenyans have internalized that these are their governments and their benefits that accrue. At some point, the government will be the one running after the people. And I think what we need to do for those of us in media and everywhere else in the public spaces is to keep telling people, don't buy the return to Egypt lie. That things were better. Don't buy that lie. Because it's very loud, and the people who tell it have a lot more space. They have a lot more space. They control a lot of that space. So we need to tell people, hello. The way it looks ridiculous that those fellows who had been slaves for 400 years says, can we go back and eat onions? Let's not buy that lie. Let's not buy that lie.
It's true. And you see, and the reality is, we are just into the 7th, 8th year of devolution. I mean, in terms of institutions of county governments, having elected them in 2013. It is so early to say devolution is failing, and that's a narrative that's trying to be, to be built. I mean, Makueni County, if I may use it, was at the brink of collapse towards the end of the last election cycle. And people had, the discussion from even the national government is that it's time now to decentralize, to dissolve the government, take care of it for 90 days until today. It's a role model. So in other words, with leadership and with people being engaged and deeply committed to the success of their own spaces, because this determines their very livelihoods. For me, that's what I see. That will basically be so difficult to reverse. The gains that we've made with devolution, even with the challenges, cannot be reversed. Can't be reversed.
Okay, let me ask this. Institutions like the Commission for Revenue Allocation, these commissions, as envisaged, were fundamental to how devolution plays out. And yet they've been, in a sense, bastardized. They don't have the teeth that they need. What is a citizen's role in being able to defend, protect, build institutions like that, in spite of a National Assembly that doesn't want to listen to it, a national government that thinks that it's an extra player in this game? How, from where you sit and you have these conversations with people, like do they even understand? Do the people understand that there are these institutions through which their fights for better resource allocation can then be managed and be channeled?
One is that the way commissions started, and I think this is a lesson that particularly CRA, which I have been very closely involved with, was such that they did not spend a lot of time doing public education and gaining public support. Yet they are only accountable to the public, to the people of this republic. So now, what has been happening, and you saw when SRC was being, beaten up, to submission, nobody was there. Yet what they were doing was in the common good. With all their limitations, they were trying to get something into it. So what I've seen, and particularly, engagement with CRA, is to go out there. At least we've been involved in conversations around the county budget economic forums, around the formula, the equity conversations. The current formula, they have gone and talked to so many people, to try and get, first of all, people to understand their responsibility, to understand their role, and now also to be able then to contribute to that. It's still a long way, because I feel commissions still, of course, the public education, public communication kind of even budgets are still some of the weakest. There's need to invest in research and all these things, but I think the way forward basically is for them to gain public support, because those are the only people they are accountable to. I think in the discussion about how we move on with the Constitution, I think we made a fundamental error in even giving commissions like CRA an advisory role. You know, they should have been higher. It should be the other way around. It's not them. It's not them basically to almost be to
be
submissive to Treasury.
Yeah.
It's them to say, to receive from Treasury and any other interested parties, and then say, having from our independent perspective, these are the amounts, and that's what Ndi was talking about. Just turning the table completely. You know, the other way around.
Yeah. All right.
You know, nation building is difficult work.
Yeah.
And this institution we are trying to dismantle, called an administrative state, it's been around 100 years. It has people who are very strong vested interests in it, and they are very organized, and we don't even see them. They are invisible because they are in those deep state sort of
their interests are personal.
structure. Their interests are personal. So, what we need, what if you ask me, the programmatic way to go about this as citizens is to organize our politics around devolution. Because if we say that our interest is devolved government, then our goal has to be to elect a pro-devolution national government. So that we have pro-devolution national government, which comes with a mandate, our mandate, to implement the constitution and particularly to strengthen devolution. We couldn't have done that before because the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Because we had not eaten, we did not really know what this is. It's only now that people see. It was very difficult to, even I think people like Abodo and I who worked on this, it was very difficult to translate this to people when it was just theory.
Yeah.
It's true.
Before the constitution was implemented. But now when they've practically seen it, this devolved system has survived for 8 years. The independence one did not last a year. It was dismantled right away. So people had no opportunity to
really understand it.
To really taste the fruits of that independence. Now that we've tasted the fruits, we have to organize politically to take on those people. Because, as I said, we are not trying to solve a common problem.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are people out there who think that we are all nice people, or sort of who care about them, and then we are trying to resolve this issue so that they can get services. No. There are people whose political objective is to take back control.
Yeah.
And if they take back control, they will keep us where we have been for 30, 40 years. It's self-defeating, as Kamodo said, and I want to sort of emphasize for this one. You know, we are now a country of almost 50 people, 50 million people. Very rapidly growing youth, globalized technology, all manner of things. You cannot control such a country from the center. A society when it gets, if you look at the world, there is no country of that size. We are one of the biggest countries in the world. Once you start hitting the 50 million mark, you become a very big country. You cannot control a country of 50 million people like a colony of 5 million. Unfortunately, the people at the center have the mindset like they are controlling a colony of 5 million people. If they don't wake up and realize the only way that you can govern a country like this, the bigger the country becomes, the more devolved it needs to be, the more decentralized that it needs to be for stability. So you cannot have a stable Kenya, given also how diverse it is geographically and culturally and all the dynamics that it's facing, by one man at the center. It cannot be organized around one man.
It's impossible. And in fact, it is not even in your interest to do so. It is not. That is what I find strange. It is not in your interest to.
So then what are all of these things that we are you know, I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, but we've talked about the Building Bridges initiative. We have these handshakes. We are seeing these attempts to organize ourselves politically, much in the same way that we've been, right? But now I think the division of revenue bill debate offers us an opportunity to really peel back that mask.
You see, let me give you, talking BBI, and it's good to be inclusive. I don't think if you look at the 9 issues that are listed by BBI, excellent issues, very well done, inclusivity. But the solution we are giving inclusivity is inclusivity for who? You see, who's being included? Because I don't think that Kenyans wake up every morning worried that that is a political lie, that their kingpin is not at the top.
there.
I think they would love them to be there. But if you ask them, I mean, if you...
But that's not their...
But that is not what... But what they are worried about included in the sharing of resources. They're worried that they're being excluded from receiving good health care, from receiving good infrastructure, from ensuring that they can sell their crops. That really is the inclusion question. And that inclusion question is resolved by the Constitution. Now, instead of us including people at the top, we're telling people that the way to resolve your problem is include your chief at the top. That again is one of those statements that is inconsistent with reality. And it is a problem that may buy you some sort of peace for some 2-3 years. But I can guarantee you it is not sustainable peace. So I'm just saying, maybe it's not negative in that sense. I mean,
it's not peace, it's
it's not peace, it's calm. In fact, it's calm. We're talking about calm. We've had calm after the handshake, and that's a good thing. But to assume that now guarantees peace, so if you have continuous handshakes, we'll have peace. You don't live in reality. People are going to start, the minute you have health workers going home, every part of this country. The minute you don't have, that is what is going to happen. Because when you don't have money for salaries, what's going to happen? People won't care that you've done handshakes. So I'm saying that it is important to do that, and I think it's important to have national reconciliation at that level. But that is not the solution to Kenya's problem.
Let me be very blunt here. We know all these leaders, we work with them. They are not the people who think for this country.
That's true. They think for themselves.
No, they actually are not thinking types. So the complexity of the things we are talking about are not their top of mind awareness. They think that once they are in power, other people will think. They will get the people who think to come with solutions, and these and the Kamodos. They will come and they will solve the problem. But theirs is to be the big chief. And then they can convene the professionals and all sorts of people.
Be a chief, but be a middleman in a sense for fixing
Yeah, because so they remember that's the way, that's their theory.
Yeah.
That's their model of leadership. That them, they are the big chief. So if they do that thing they want to do, whatever animal it is, and they convene themselves and they are sitting there as big chiefs, that we will all come and bow to them and do the work. I want to tell them publicly we will not, because we are tired. Okay? We're tired of propping them up, and they have no direction. So, and partly why you see them struggling is because we have abandoned them. Because these things that we are discussing are the things which are important. And the things that they are trying to tell us about, that what they're calling inclusion, they're talking about including themselves. Including themselves. So, and again, that's something which you see, that disconnect between people who are preoccupied with power and the people who are worried about sort of
country.
Country. And that divide is and again, it also, I think it's also a product, part of the outcome of the Constitution, because the Constitution now, you can engage the real issues facing a country locally at the devolved level, so that you can actually go and apply yourself to a problem of agricultural productivity in a country without needing to talk to those people.
It's true. And also, I think it's why all these mechanisms, I don't think they will, for instance, BBI, why I think it might not even go far, is because it's not addressing the fundamental need of the people of this country right now. In a society like ours, where we have reached, people are not looking. You know, we are in a state we are leading a generation of people who don't even want to be in positions. All they want to be is in influence in their area of operation. So they want to run their own company and be assured there is water, there is security.
And they
will do the things. Yeah. They will do the things for themselves. Then you come up with a model where you are fighting about who gets and how many MPs, how many less, how many MCAs, how many less. All those kind of thing. Yet the fundamental things that the youth of this country are seeking are those facilitatory kind of, ensure me that there will be security, that I can work all night and go home. I can walk home at 3 a.m., without any, and all the models that we keep talking about, that was the role of government, at that particular point of the growth, So unless people are assured of food, unless people are assured of, opportunities of education, or assured of healthcare, is what Kamodo is saying. If they are not assured of those fundamental basic necessities, and that's why the Bill of Rights, is explicit in terms of what should be going on. The agenda is there. There is no other greater agenda than ensuring that. For me, I think that is the focus. That should be the focus moving forward. And if that is not the focus, then you're basically going in the opposite.
In the opposite direction, and these conversations happen over and over and again. Gentlemen, look, the matters of this country at this point in time are such that we can discuss this. But we have to wind it up at some point. So I just want to say thank you, all of you, for coming and demystifying to a point at least what's happening with the Division of Revenue Bill. Hoping that we can have further discussions about this in such a way that a person sitting at home would look at this and then now understand the kind of political games that are being played, but more fundamentally where they fit into this puzzle and how it is they can make their own lives better by trying to appreciate what the big game is. So I just want to say thank you, Kamodo, Asante Sana, Abraham, thanks a lot, and David as well, thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Right, Asante Sana, and thank you very much for watching. Hopefully we can have more of these discussions as we go along.
Thank you.
Thank you.